Good day. This is Len Lazarick with MarylandReporter.com, and we're discussing the governor's new $35.8 billion budget with two budget experts. One is Senator David Brinkley, the ranking minority member, ranking Republican on the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee, and the other is Neil Bergsman, director of the Maryland Budget and Tax Policy Institute. It's safe to say, if you were looking at right and left, I forget where we are on camera. That's my right, so it's to your left and to your right. The governor did a 38-slide PowerPoint presentation yesterday, and it was titled "A Balanced Approach." Your group and allies, a coalition, have been advocating a balanced approach. Is this budget the kind of balanced approach you were looking for?
Well, it certainly has elements of the balanced approach we've been looking for. The governor's budget proposal does include $1 of revenue for every $3 of cuts. So it's still heavy on the cuts, but the approach that includes some significant revenue increases based on ability to pay and based on modernizing deficiencies in our current revenue structure are very positive proposals.
And for you, Senator?
Well, our key point is he still is increasing spending by 4.96%. Now, they might say that we're making some reductions in certain areas, but the fact is the budget's going up by $1.7 billion. It's OPM, it's other people's money, and it's the taxpayers' money. And
that's the highest increase I've heard of. Where do you get that number? I think it's like
my public school math says from $34.2 billion up to $35.9 billion. That's an increase of $1.7 billion. If you multiply it out, 4.96% is what the state's spending over and above what they had last year. And so, yeah, there are some shifts that he's doing, some changes that he's doing, which I think, frankly, are kind of healthy. They've not been doing what he has been doing in the past, which is just kicking the can down the road, raiding some funds. Does he still do that? Yeah, he does it. He doesn't do it to as great an extent. But the problem here is you guys have been advocating for a millionaire's tax. Well, now, and this is Delegate O'Donnell, I want to give the credit where credit's due. He created the term the thousandaire tax, and now what they want to do is increase the income taxes. They had to go down to $100,000 of income, which is many families. When you have two income families, and with housing prices and things they do, that's not untoward in this state. And so. At that point,
it's 20% of the people who file tax returns.
Exactly, and so that's just one tax that we know of now. He has yet to introduce or roll out anything dealing with the gas tax. I think that they're including some of the numbers from the flush tax here, but the specifics of that have to come in different legislation.
But
we'll see.
As you pointed out in your initial response, this was not quite the approach that you would have proposed. More tax increases and different kinds of tax increases than he did.
Well, listen, no one, including the governor himself, is completely satisfied with this budget. But it is a responsible budget. This is a budget with adult choices. It has a minimum number of temporary measures and accounting gimmicks in it. And yeah, the legislature gets to spend the next 80 days improving it. But this is a much better starting point than anything we've seen in the last several years.
How do you feel about the thousandaire tax?
I think the governor's income tax proposal is a good proposal. It kicks in at $150,000 for joint returns. So if you have two $75,000 incomes, yeah, that is a middle-class lifestyle, no question. But it's also it's hitting the people who do have some ability to pay a little bit extra to support education and health care and job training and the other things that will make Maryland competitive today and tomorrow.
And I think some of the counters to this is what he's taking away is people's ability to make deductions against the home interest that they pay, the property tax bills that they pay, charitable deductions. Right now the charities and nonprofits in this state are at a very difficult time because of the economy and because contributions are cutting back. And so here, by virtue of eliminating some of the deductibility on that side of it, they stand to be harmed too. And
Sure.
it's just not, it's not healthy.
Sure, but,
But-
the incentive to give is going to be much more heavily affected by your federal tax than your state tax. Federal deductions already phase out in these income ranges. So this is just mirroring what the federal tax code already does.
And it has the political advantage of not raising rates. So if you look at
Well, that's the fiscal shell game, and that goes on all the time. The fact is, Maryland's families have to look at, are we or are we not putting out more money for someone else to decide where it goes? And that's in essence what a tax does. Now, are some of them necessary? Sure, some of them are necessary. But in a time when we're trying to get Maryland families back up to speed so they can afford, tuition to send their kids to school wherever they want to, or afford to keep up on their mortgage payments, or afford to buy the new car, or afford to do a home improvement, or afford to do any of these other things that we'd like them to do as consumers, which contribute to our economy, this is another move that takes money away from those families so they don't have that discretionary income and can't choose to do that.
Well, of course, families do want to live in a state that has a strong public education system, that has a good infrastructure, that has good public services. And from the onset of this recession, which has turned out to be the longest and deepest recession since the Great Depression and the slowest and weakest recovery, we've balanced 5 budgets with a steady diet of cuts. So it is time to ask those who are most able
I was
to
gonna
give
ask
something
Challenge you
back.
on that. You tell me where the cut is. From when the time he came into office, he was spending at such and such a threshold, and this budget takes it to $36 billion. Last I checked, there's no cuts there. If we went from $30 billion to $36 billion, there's a 20% increase.
So you know what? Back in 2007, you all were in special session, and you passed a package of taxes, spending cuts, and slot machines that would have structurally balanced the budget if there had been no recession. And you had projections for what the state budget was going to be every year for the next 5 years after that point. So what the budget is spending today is $2 billion below where you figured you were going to be coming out of that special session.
Maryland families don't have that luxury of an accounting gimmick to say, well, you would have spent this, but the fact that we backed it down to only a $6 billion increase instead of an $8 billion increase, that's not a cut. When I look at my books, when you look at your books, when you look at your books, Neil, you don't say, well, I could have taken this, but I cut it back, therefore I made a cut.
Well, so what's been cut? Well, education.
But that's a gimmick.
The education formula has been cut back, and the result for that, we've been around the state listening to citizens, so we've heard teachers in Montgomery County and Wacomico County talking about their class sizes growing from 25 to 30 to 33 and 34.
I don't buy it.
And we've heard the stories
buy it.
about how those teachers are unable to reach students to instill learning like they're used to, like they're expected to, like those parents want them to. So we are losing education quality.
Well, then you know something, there's something inherently wrong with that, because when we first started on this thing, before Thornton, the state was contributing $2 billion a year to education. And now it's over $5 billion. And you're telling me we still have those problems after we've increased funding by 150%? That's absurd. I don't buy it. That might be what the unions are feeding you, but that's not what's coming on. Do we have challenges in education? Absolutely. Do we have challenges in trying to make sure that the locals can be responsive to some of the needs and adjust class sizes, be responsive in changing curriculum and things like that? Yes. But to say that we're still behind the 8 ball, then that's just saying that we wasted all the other efforts that we did.
Is there anything good in this budget that
I
you
think
can
the
say?
important thing here, and some of my colleagues on the Republican side disagree with this, but the fact that we are now having a discussion of sharing the costs of pensions, that has been a benefit that has unfairly inured to the benefit of the wealthier jurisdictions. Now, is this the formula for it? I don't think so, in the context that it bases it where it pays for it by increasing income taxes on people. But that certainly is a discussion that has to take place. Why? because the locals set the salary, therefore they should have some share in the cost of it.
Have your groups, a large part of your coalition is the teachers union. Do you share their opposition to this pension shift?
Well, the teachers, the boards of education, the counties are all vehemently opposed to this pension shift. I think that it's correct policy that the local governments share part of the teacher retirement cost. I think that should be offset by increased state direct aid to the school systems, because here in Maryland, we're actually on the low end in terms of the percentage of the education budget that comes from the state level. I don't want to see the pension shift result in less funding for schools and classrooms and a degradation in education quality and widening of the achievement gap in
And
our
Neil,
schools.
who does want to see that? Nobody wants to see that. And that's part of some of the fallacy when we hear on some of the stuff, whether it's environmental issues, education issues. No one wants to see a degradation of that. At the same time, somebody has to decide that, or step up and say, look, are we really achieving the gains that we want? And as I just shared, we just increased state funding by 150% for public education. And now we're hearing that's not enough. And that was done in response for a lawsuit that we were facing. And so the state has made tremendous gains. This administration and the Ehrlich administration did some, he kept the promises that the legislature made without any source of funding on making sure that education got its increases. But now we have to critically evaluate and make sure that we're getting the results that we
Well,
can.
we've barely
We could go back
scratched.
and forth, couldn't we?
Yeah, we could go on for some time. We've barely scratched the surface of a $36 billion budget, but that gives you the flavor for some of the debate that's going to go on in Annapolis for the next some weeks, 9 weeks.
80 days or so.
Yeah, 80 days or so. And it'll be pretty contentious this time around, it would seem to be. Thanks for watching MarylandReporter.com.